Hello out there, all you fantastic historians, and welcome to another lesson using the Industrial Revolution website on child labour. Under the child labour tab, there are 2 lessons under here, and today we are going to tackle lesson 1, overview of child labour during the Industrial Revolution. So your learning intention and success criteria. By the end of this lesson, you need to know child labour during the Industrial Revolution, and you need to be able to explain some of the consequences of child labour, why children worked, and how rights were made to protect children. So, why did children work? So children who worked in factories and mines came from poor working class families who could barely afford food and rent. Child workers were children who had to go to work to support their family. Children were also employed because their wages were 10 to 20% that of an adult's wage, and they could perform tasks adults could not. Employers could also make them work 12 to 16 hours a day. Children also couldn't form unions to protect themselves, so they were exploited. So these are the main reasons why kids worked. People often had very large families to make sure that their family had enough income or more ways to get income. Children couldn't protect themselves because they were so young, they couldn't form unions, and they were forced to work for less and to work for longer because they were kids and they could be forced to. Now, let's look at the impacts of child labour. So children were subjected to dangerous working conditions and were overworked. Children would lose fingers, hands and arms by being caught in the machinery, typically textile factories, which I just spoiled a bit there. This happened in textile factories or when children reached into machinery to get it working again. Children who worked in mines because they were small would be harmed and could be killed by mine collapses. The worst thing was children who had been injured were fired from their jobs because they couldn't work as well. So that was the worst thing. If you lost your hand or your finger or your arm, you'd get fired from your job because you couldn't complete your job anymore. Not like today at all. So guys, the first 3 tasks for this lesson are 3 videos. So the first video is on a man named Lewis Hine. He was a photographer and he took these photos actually during the very latter part of the Industrial Revolution, and his photos are still world-renowned and some of the most impactful photography ever, because he raised awareness for these kids and what they were going through. So that's just a video on him and the photos that he took. So you need to write down 3 facts from that video while you're watching it. Your second video is by history.com, just a very general sort of video on child labour. And then task 3 is from Horrible Histories. It's called Victorian Claims Direct. And they cover quite in a comical way how if kids were injured on the job, they were fired. So they cover that little dot point there. Your next task, guys, is source work on child labour during the Industrial Revolution. So your first source here, and we'll do all these answers together, is a photograph taken by Lewis Hine in 1912 of a boy who lost his arm using farming machinery. So, number 1, is this a primary or secondary source? Why? It's a photograph taken during the Industrial Revolution, so it is a primary source. Who created the source is Lewis Hine. He's the photographer who took this photo. When was the source created? He took it in 1912, so that's our answer. Now, number 4, how do you think the boy is feeling while the photograph is being taken? So you kind of have to look at the photo and think a bit more deeply. I'd say he's certainly feeling maybe even a little bit embarrassed that he's having his photo taken, but certainly I'm sure that he's feeling quite negative about how he's been injured at work and now he can't do his job in a factory anymore. He can't complete his job on the farm anymore. So he has to do other types of jobs and might not be able to get paid as much money. Number 5, what information can this photo tell us about child labour during the Industrial Revolution? Well, it tells us that kids were quite often injured during the Industrial Revolution. It's not just a fact about history we learn from 100 years ago, but these happened to real people and they had real consequences once these awful things happened to them. Your second source, guys, is a cartoon drawn by an unknown artist in 1912 representing the child labour force supporting the Industrial Revolution and the upper class, certainly. So here we've got a cartoon. We can see we've got the factories and the smog in the background, but we've got a little girl holding up this ball with a rich, fat guy smoking a cigar and reading the paper, wearing his top hat, sitting on top of the ball, and she's struggling to hold it all up. So number one, is this a primary or secondary source? Why? So it's a political cartoon that was made during 1912, so it is a primary source. Why might the creator of this source wanted to have stayed anonymous? So essentially, this is targeted negatively towards the upper class. So this person or this artist might have wanted to stay anonymous because they didn't want to face any repercussions or any backlash from the upper class based on their work, because the upper class did rule society, really. Number three, when was the source created? We've got 1912. We can start to see a lot of these sources were made during 1912, which is when the child labour movement, or opposing child labour, really got going. Number four, what is the purpose of this cartoon? What is the cartoon saying? So this cartoon is essentially saying, and by representing, how child labour and kids essentially supported the whole economy, which benefited the upper class, the rich capitalist society, and essentially she's, holding them up, she's supporting them. So I think the ball represents kind of the economy and the Industrial Revolution society, but certainly the man on the top here smoking a cigar, reading the paper, he's benefiting from it while, kids are out there dying, injuring themselves and working extremely hard to support this whole system up. So that's what that cartoon is saying. Number five, the man on the top of the ball is well-dressed and fat. What is the significance of this? So he's fat and well-dressed, so he's profiting, and this type of people are profiting off child labour. That's what it represents. Number six, the ball the child is holding is large. What is the purpose of this? It's to show the big economy and the big labour force that kids were supporting. Number three is a poster produced by the National Labour Committee. Click on the link under the source to find when it was made. So I'm going to make you do a little bit of research for this one. So number one, is this a primary or secondary source? Well, it's a poster made during the Industrial Revolution, so it is a primary source. Who created the source? We've got it here, the National Labour Committee, but if you look under where it says author here, Lewis Hine is also a contributor or a co-creator of this source because he took these photographs here. So there's two answers for who created the source. When was the source created? We can look at that date as well. We've got 1913. What is the purpose of this poster and what does it want to achieve? So let's have a look at the poster here. So to start off, we've got children are equipped by experiences to care for themselves in modern industry. So essentially the poster is referencing an article where a little boy fell in a big coal chute and died. So to prove the point that children are not equipped to care for themselves in the workplace. And these are some examples of some boys who have died in the workplace during the Industrial Revolution. And then it goes on to say here, 3 times as many industrial accidents occur to children as to adults. So employment of children is due to ignorance, greed, necessity of industry and parents. So they're also commenting on the fact that parents really supported and encouraged child labour as well, because parents were benefiting off child labour. And are any of these reasons worth a child's life? So it's making the audience feel guilty. So the purpose of this poster is to raise awareness and oppose child labour. Number 5, what evidence does the poster use to say that children cannot care for themselves in dangerous work environments? Well, it's referencing this story here, this news article about a boy falling to death down a coal chute in a coal mine. According to the committee, how likely is a child to have a serious accident at work compared to adults? So we've got that here, 3 times as many industry accidents occur to children as to adults. According to the committee, why are children employed? There's 3 reasons: ignorance, greed, and necessity, and it benefits industry and parents. Number 8, how does the poster try to get an emotional response from the audience? By questioning them and making them feel guilty. So are any of these reasons worth a child's life? So they're comparing essentially the reasons for child employment, balancing it against the life of a child, so to make the audience feel guilty that this is occurring. Because adults are the ones who are enforcing this, and the adults are the ones who are going to change it as well. The kids can't, but adults can. Here we've got a photograph taken in 1911 of Phoebe Thomas, and this makes up source 4. So here we've got a photograph of Phoebe, and if you zoom in, you can see Phoebe has lost her hand in the workplace. It is a primary source for number 1 because it is a photograph taken during the Industrial Revolution, so it's a primary source. Who created it? We've got the National Labour Committee. That's who took this photo. Someone from this committee took this photo. When was the source created? We've got 1911. That's an easy one. What is the purpose of this photograph and what does it want to achieve? So essentially, it wants to show you the consequences of child labour and almost make you feel a bit guilty and sorry for Phoebe as well. And how does this photo make you feel? Well, certainly when I look at this photo, the first thing I think of is this poor girl who's had to now face the real consequences because something terrible has happened to her. Something that was enforced upon her because she had to go to work. She was forced to go to work, and this is what's happened to her. I also feel incredibly lucky as well that I wasn't a kid growing up during the Industrial Revolution, so I feel very grateful for my place here in modern society now. Number 5, we've got a photograph taken in 1906, again by the National Labour Committee, of Frank, a 14-year-old boy crushed by a mining car. So we've got question number 1. It is a primary source. Again, it's a photograph taken during the Industrial Revolution. It's created. Number 2, by the National Labour Committee. And then number 3, when was it created? This photo was taken in 1906. So what is the purpose of this photograph and what does it want you to achieve? So it's a photo of Frank. Frank was crushed by a mining cart down a coal mine. And certainly when I look at this photo, I know the purpose of this source is to get an emotional response out of you, to make you feel almost like guilty and sorry for Frank that this happened to him. That this life that's here in this photo is now gone. Number 5, many of you are a similar age to Frank. What emotions do you feel when you look at this photograph? Now, I'm not a similar age to Frank, but I was, but you guys studying this unit now are, so I'm going to leave that one up to you to answer. And then, guys, there's a Kahoot summary on the first lesson of child labour here. By clicking on that image there, you can go ahead and play that one. So, guys, that is your first lesson, an overview of child labour during the Industrial Revolution. During this lesson, we looked at some of the consequences and reasons behind child labour. And during your next lesson, we're going to do some of the specific jobs kids had during the Industrial Revolution. So thanks for watching, guys, and make sure you go ahead and subscribe if you want to stay updated to any new lessons or any new websites that are made. Cheers.